Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we have another fantastic guest. I met this gentleman at a mastermind that I recently went to, and it's just incredible. The people you don't know that you need to know, and then you meet them, you're like, I needed to know you. I needed to hear your story. I'm excited to hear more about what created you and why you are how you are, and really dig into the mission of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. So Brian Kent, he actually has a book out right now. I'm holding it up if you're watching the broadcast here, but it's called the R Factor, Scaling Your Business Through Managing Relationships. And relationships is the next currency, or the new currency, they say. It's probably always been the currency in reality, but now I think people are more conscious of the fact that relationships need to be developed, they need to be understood, and then how do you manage those? How do you take care of them properly? So Dr. Brian Kent is a global leader and senior consultant focusing on international and domestic operations. He worked in the military or for the defense and homeland security. He's just done a bunch of different things, focused on business acquisition through or acquisitions in the DoD. And so lots of negotiations. And one of the things that I'm excited about is somebody that I look up to from a question perspective is Chris Voss, who is an FBI negotiator. But I think the practice of negotiating is sometimes people look at the practice of negotiating from a perspective of somebody trying to get something from the other person. And that's maybe a zero-sum game way to look at negotiation. But I think negotiation is really more, for me at least, and so this is where we're going to see what Brian says, but this is my going into it perspective, and I'm open to my mind being changed. But right now, I feel that negotiation for me is clarifying what each person needs out of an interaction and doing your best to accomplish that to where everybody gets what they needs or gets what they need out of the interaction. So it's not sales per se. It's not trying to win something better than somebody else, but negotiating. How do you communicate clearly what your needs are and make sure everybody gets their needs met? And that's when I go into a negotiation. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking just of myself. I'm thinking of, okay, what are our needs? How do we get everybody to leave this negotiation or this interaction happy, fulfilled, and feeling like, man, I'd love to come back to the negotiating table with Sam because I feel like it was a good thing. I feel like respected. I feel cared about. And that's all part of communication. And most of that communication is questions, learning what your other person needs effectively and knowing what you can provide for that. So when I heard that he's, this acquisitions negotiator, then I'm like, okay, I want to know more about that process. What are the best questions that he's learned in his life to ask? And how do those relate to our family? How do those relate to our relationships, our marriages, or our relationships with our children? How do those relate to our faith? How do those relate to God? How do those relate in business? So these questions are probably pretty universally good questions to ask. So with that being said, a little bit long intro, but Brian, I'm really, really excited about this. Sincerely, go ahead and share with us how you got to where you are. How did you gain all this experience? And what kind of led you down the road to this, where you're at right now and where you're headed to help other people learn from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam, for having me today too. Well, I grew up in rural North Florida. So, because some people say with that accent, and they don't think you have it from Florida. Everybody thinks you're like you're from Orlando or Miami. But anyway, so rural accent actually comes from most of my life in Florida or North Carolina. I grew up on a farm, so that was not new for agricultural area. On the farm, you learn how to use common sense, because you don't always have the tools that you need to be successful, but you still have to be successful. So you learn to actually think of the smart way to do it, or using common sense to keep yourself safe. So I did that through my teenage years, or most of my early teenage years, and really started working, I'd say about 11 or 12 years old, doing small construction jobs, working with livestock, and then eventually actually ran tomatoes and watermelon produce all the way from the farm to the farmers markets up in Tennessee and North Carolina. At 17, graduated high school early, obviously. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I said, well, at that time, the commercial for the Army was, it was a great place to start and come be all you can be. So I took the Army up on their slogan, and I joined for 3 years. It was a pretty interesting first 3 years. My first overseas assignment was actually on the border of Israel, between Israel and Egypt. So as I watch things in today's time, I know exactly what's happening there, or what the mentality is there, having lived among those people for a year. But fast forward, I did 20 years in the service. The gentleman that actually was my early mentor, my early person that I followed or modeled work ethic, was a guy by the name of John Stone. He was a one-leg amputee, and he was one of the largest farmers in the county. So if he could do it with one leg, there was no reason a young able-bodied guy like I could not do it, right? So it showed me the hard work can really get you to success in the future. So as I worked there, kind of worked my way through the system, joined the Army, same thing, kept the same work ethic. Actually, for the first year or so, it was actually easier life, because, I got the rack and some food, and it was pretty much timed on where the hard work was. And when it got too hot, a government job, they actually have a heat advisories where they actually give you time off. In the watermelon field, you don't get the heat advisory. You just get to drink more water and keep working. So it's completely different mentality. But fast forward, after Somalia, we had our incident in Somalia as the U.S. My boss, General Garrison, at that time, recommended me to go to officer candidate school. And the big thing for under him as a mentor was, in all cases, use your best judgment. And he supported his employees, and it taught me how, if someone's in your downstream, that you support those people, because if you do, they'll stay loyal. And if they can trust you as a boss, they'll be more aggressive and more entrepreneurial, and push the team harder. And so I took that kind of mentality as I moved to the officer candidate school, and then into being an officer, and really supported my people. And they did. They were loyal. I helped them get promoted. I helped them with their families and their lives. And it was really a team mentality, no matter where in the world we went to. So towards the end of my career, I had about 5 years left, and I actually had an opportunity to become a government acquisition officer, which, Sam, you were mentioning a little earlier, where I was actually a program manager for about $300 million worth of government programs. And in that, it taught me I had 26 different projects that I had oversight around the globe. So I truly started international operations, I say, from the time I joined the Army, because I went to Israel, where I was doing security and protocol work. But now I really had my footprint in my hands in things that were all over the globe. And I took that, looking at new technology, looking at what the government needed to buy. This was early 2000s. We were having the surge. We had started in Afghanistan. So I really had to think about what we needed to be successful, or what the guys on the ground forward were asking to be successful. And then we had to find it fast. We had to make sure it worked. How were we going to train it? How were we going to get it there? And how were we going to sustain it? Because it's not like you could just run down to the local Walmart, in Kabul, and grab something that was made in somewhere in California or Texas, or pick a state, right? So that made us think about the total life cycle. So when you're asking the questions, right, we had to ask the questions, because when we actually launched it, we may have to send it self-sufficient with all the supply tail with it to use it. So I did that for about 4 years. And as I was watching that process, I was identifying failures in the government buying system. And at that time, I'd already finished my master's degree. So I started my PhD, and I actually studied technology transfer. And some people call it technology transition. And it's really looking at how you have a new piece of equipment or a new software or a new process, and how you integrate that into a company and work with the company to make it work. In this case, we're grabbing something from a company and we're sticking it in the military or into a government agency, and we need it to process within the processes of that organization. 2005-ish, I retired and figured I could do more as a commercial person working back with the government or supporting the government. And so I started my second of probably 6 or 7 companies I've owned since then. And I really have developed my career asking that why question. Why are we doing this? What do we got to do to make it better? I sold that company in 2016 to a company larger than me, and they actually wanted me to come in and help them build their international business. So I came in, and my division was about $10 to $15 million, or my unit. Within 3 years, I had grown that to about $150 million, and we were really expanding. I was actually managing or had projects across 17 time zones. So I learned how to use the setting on your clock or on your phone where people couldn't call you when you're trying to sleep. But anyway, it was really looking at that. And then when you go different places internationally, you better ask why. What's the question? Because in Europe, even the Wi-Fi is different. The cell phones are different. All the power is different. So you need to understand how you survive in a new ecosystem. And I think in business, that's helped me survive, because as I move around to different businesses, it's a different ecosystem, and you have to know how to survive, and you have to know who to ask, and you have to not be scared to ask why. Well, in 2020, I actually left corporate America. I got promoted in this Fortune 100 company to the point that I was doing spreadsheets and quarterly reports to the street. And I'm a people person, which is thus the R factor, the relationships. So I went back and started consulting, and several companies would say, why don't you get this written down? Why don't you have a coaching piece? Or why don't you? And so I did. I sat down and worked with a ghostwriter and wrote the R factor. And it talks about the relationships 360 degrees within the company, and also how to deal with your vendors and your customers, and why you should be having a relationship with them, because they're not just a target. They're not just a data point of a sale. There's a relationship there that has to be managed, one, to grow it, and another thing to understand what's happening in their ecosystem that could jeopardize your career or jeopardize your downline or your sales. So in the future, what you kind of want me to lead to that? Well, really, I'm using the R factor to get to my target market across the government, across a lot of areas where it used to be a face-to-face market or a local, you only dealt with people local. A lot of those people that are buying, or those negotiators, are aging out of the market. They're retiring, or they're finding something else to do. And I've found that the generation my age and younger, if we're going to have a meeting, we get on the internet. We look at LinkedIn. We look at websites. So I really have focused over the last 2 years branding myself to be that thought leader in my market space. And the key to that is, so therefore, when they look at me, they know me, they listen to this good old country boy thing, my voice, and it's really to build a trust with a client before they even call me. And then the last piece that I'll say on to wrap that up before we get into our questions is, your process is working. I was actually with you at the mastermind last week, or whenever it was, a week or so ago. I got a phone call. We were in Arizona on a stage in front of 90 people. A government buyer quoted my book and my name. So obviously I'm getting to who I needed to see my book. And he had read it well enough that he explained the acronym I use for business, and the why is the man. Because all transactions, the way I look at business, there's 3 pieces to it. There's somebody that has the problem or the need, which is the end. Someone in the organization has the authority to commit the company, fiduciary responsibility, and then somebody has the money, whether it's the bank, whether it's the company's allocated money to one department and contracting to another. So I call it the man. Who's got the money? Who's got the authority to commit the money? And who's got the need? And if you break business down to that simplistic process, you can build relationships across the organization to get to those 1, 2, or 3 people to where you can do business with them and understand how that company buys. And that's what I coach and teach.
I love it. Man, we are, I can tell you right now, we are not going to have time to get over everything. And as you were sharing, we're going to take probably a different route on this podcast than I've ever planned on doing. And we'll see. Definitely, this is not how I planned on having this conversation, but I want to give some backstory or some preface. Over the last, maybe month or so, as I've been putting my daughter to bed, I've been starting to sing to her the national anthem, right? And you might think, well, why are you singing the national anthem to your daughter as a lullaby or as a go to sleep thing? And for me, I was raised very much based off the Constitution. We'll just put it that way. Read the Constitution, memorized the Constitution, memorized the Declaration of Independence. It was a founding document in my life, not just as a country, but in my life. And the idea of patriotism has always been fascinating to me, because what are you being a patriot to or for? Are you being a patriot to an entity, or are you being a patriot to values and identities? And it's an interesting question because I think that separates, even in our country, there's large separations right now about what does it mean to defend the Constitution. Are we defending some document, or are we defending the values across the world? What are we doing across the world, militarily or otherwise, philanthropically, with our money? What's happening around the world? How is America influencing the world, and what's that interaction? And there was a time in my life where I actually, went overseas, and whether it's from bad news cycles or that they all watch CNN, I have no idea why this is the case, but there's actually a lot of people outside of our country that don't like America. There's lots of people who do like America, but they get to see a different America. Just like inside your house, you probably have certain rules inside your house, and outside your house, you act a little bit different. And that's not bad. It's not fake. It's just different. In America, we get to experience a certain side of America, and outside of America, there's different experiences of America. Now, whether that's good or bad, I'm not here to really talk about. It's just different. But for me, I still see value in the indoctrination of believing and supporting the country you stand for, just as much as I hope the people in Mexico are singing the Mexico national anthem, or the people in Russia are committed to Russia, or the people in Ukraine are committed to Ukraine, or Israel are committed to Israel. Like, I think that having a sense of community and something that you can all agree on with the people around you is important. And I hope that that's America. I hope that, because that's where I live, that's where we can support. Then I went to a concert last night where my family's singing, Charlie and Declan and Quincy, my kids. They're in this choir called the MCO, Millennium Choirs and Orchestra concert. If you haven't ever heard of this thing, you should look it up on YouTube. It is like the most incredible thing. The average choir location has anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people in the choir. Wow. Ages from 4 to dead. Like, lots going on. And just go watch YouTube videos of it. It's absolutely incredible, immaculate, ran perfectly. And their mission is to really bring God into music. And they have different things. Well, today, or this weekend, they're doing 6 performances, and it's all patriotic. Mm-hmm. And so we're sitting there, and I was raised that as soon as you see an American flag and there's the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance is happening, you stand up, you take your hat off, you reverence what's happening. Wow. And I found it interesting that as we're sitting there, there's this song happening, and they're singing. I don't know what the song was, but there was a moment that the flag that wasn't present before, it started to come down on rollers and be lowered down into the scene behind the choir. And the song was about 4 minutes long. And the last part of the song was the kids were singing the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. And so as this is happening, as soon as, if I'm just hearing the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm probably not standing up. This is just me. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just me. But as soon as the flag starts coming down into view, it was like not even really, I wasn't thinking about it, but my body stands up, hat comes off, hands on my heart. And like, I'm respecting this experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what was shocking to me was there was probably, we made it like halfway through the Pledge of Allegiance before everybody was standing up.
That's unfortunately that has probably commonplace now, Sam, because the students, I know some states are talking about putting the Pledge of Allegiance back into school, but a lot of people in the last 2 decades or 2.5 decades don't understand the Pledge of Allegiance or standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance. They've just not been taught that. And then now it's, well, the last decade with this stupid football crap, some of them now are wanting to take a knee when which is completely contradictory to the way you're taught, especially when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that unfortunately is 2 decades or 3 decades of just lack of education is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I would say maybe not. Unfortunately, I wouldn't even call it lack of education, but I think it's active education in the contrary. And I think that's kind of how our country has been. They've been actively educating to not. And what's fascinating about it, so I have this experience, and I think, why is it now a political statement that could potentially hurt your career or whatever to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? It's like such a contrary thing that I grew up in. So the reason I'm bringing this up is you have this experience of being, I'm going to say being universal, but serving in the military, something I deeply honor and never want to do myself, but I'm grateful that there's great men and women like yourself who choose to take on that responsibility or that accountability to do that. I'm grateful for that. My question is, when you're going around, because we have this view of America, and then when we step outside of America, other people view it differently. I think the reverse happens as well. There's a lot of propaganda in our world for everything. And so when we're looking at the Israel conflict or the Ukrainian conflict or whatever it is, you spent time over there with those people. You spent time in that same region. What like insight would you be able to give as far as like the positions of these different people and what they're trying to actually negotiate, and what's the main contention? Because I think if we can understand, and these people are actually at war with each other. Most of our neighbors and the people we work with were not actually at physical war with each other, but before anything becomes physical, you have a warring heart. You have a heart or a belief system that's in a contrary. What does it look like to try and negotiate some type of peace in that type of conflict?
Wow. There's libraries full of books, Sam, to ask that same question. So, first of all, let's take it a bite at a time. So about 3 years ago, there was a survey done on the American dream. And I think it was 1,000 or 3,000 people to respond to it. And the thing that caught me off guard when it came back was that internationally, there's a bigger belief in the American dream than there was with U.S. citizens. So I think some of that is back to that education that people think you can't have it. Well, you and I both know if you're entrepreneurial and you want to go work, I've never had a problem getting the job. If anything, I got too many jobs.
Right.
So when I go internationally, so I stood up a base where we put about 400 or 500 people in Poland, and during the Trump administration, and the Polish people, it was open arms. They were just as friendly as they could be. It was all about, one, they knew the American money was coming with it because they'd seen what happened to Germany. But two was we had made a commitment as a nation to come make sure Russia didn't roll into their back door.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a different issue. I mean, that's an open-armed piece. Well, then you go to Germany, and Germany's they're their own European power. right? And they are very entrenched in their belief. There's some things they don't like about America, but some things, the reason they really don't want NATO and the UN to, NATO to expand is because right now they only got to worry about them and France, because the way they vote over there, the two biggest countries right now are France and Germany. So therefore it's like the Electoral College, they get the biggest block. But all of a sudden, if you let Ukraine and Poland and Lithuania, all of a sudden that Eastern bloc of Europe becomes a bigger bloc. Right. So there's a whole different political part to the negotiation when they say, why does it take so long for Finland to get into NATO? Well, that's because there's a political shell game with the Electoral College for EU.
Okay.
So that's a whole different, I call that the geopolitical discussion, right?
Sure.
Now, when you get into the villages of Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, or you get into some of those towns that you're working with, they have a much deeper, our nation doesn't even understand that problem, because we are set up to where if you're poor, we're going to give you something. You get to the Middle East here, if you're poor, you're poor. There's not a subsidy thing where you get a cell phone and a car and cheaper rent. There you figure out what two pieces of tin you want to lean together, and you figure out how you're going to get water to your little hut. So it's a completely different. People that say they understand now, first thing, when I hear anybody talk about Africa or the Middle East, I say, when was the last time you were there?
Which I'm not. That's why I'm asking you, because I've never been there, and I'm just really curious. I want to cut through the news cycles and say, what's it actually like being there?
And then the news, as you know, is a modified Adobe Pro modified. It's the best they can show you or the worst they can show you, because they've got a slant on what they're actually doing. It's not the people. Right. Most of the places I've been, people love people. I mean, I was in last year, I was in Jordan, I was in UAE, I went to Abu Dhabi, and I went to the Philippines. All three locations, when you look at the individuals and the relationships, you can build a relationship with the people. It's not until you add all of that other garbage and the geopolitical pieces to it do you have the problems. And then that's when you get into the manipulation of the masses, or the manipulation of the news to make it go one way or the other. When I lived in Israel, I lived there for a year, and believe it or not, it was same problems then that we were having, even maybe part of what you'd call now. Whereas there were car bombings or bus bombings or backpack bombings in the 80s. I mean, that was just, that was how, in the U.S., that's how we stood up our whole counterterrorism force, was because of all the problems from the jihadi problem in the Middle East. And we lived right above it. And every other Sunday night, because at that time it was $3 a minute to call back to the U.S., I talked to my mother. And she got a timer. She got to talk 15 minutes because it was $45. Right? That's a lot for a farm lady in North Florida.
Yeah.
And so we would talk, and her big questions would be, because she had seen the news, there'd been a bombing, so the first thing we did was we literally went through the safety. It was almost like it was an agenda to the call. The first thing was always about my safety. Mm-hmm. And you find yourself almost getting them say, "Oh yeah, that was a bench bombing, Mom. It's about 50 miles from here. That's a little heated area. They always have problems there. Nobody's worried about it." And it's like every 3 weeks there's going to be a bombing there, so you already know to mark the calendar and stay away from there in 3 weeks. It was kind of like a silent protest on that some shit got blew up, right?
Right.
But the people, it was the Egyptians, the Palestinians, and the Israelis, and other Arabs that were filtering through, and the Jordanians. We saw them all, and they had their biases where they kept their distances from each other. And of course, you knew you were at war all the time. So, like, I was a young NCO, and if I went to a nightclub on a Friday night, I was the only guy in the club without a gun, because they were expecting another November 7th anytime. So they were ready to go to war at a moment's notice. And so it was a different lifestyle. And I think in the U.S., we've kind of gotten spoiled to that. because as long as you stay out of the neighborhood where the gangs are, for the most part, or where crime's happening in terms of some of these bigger cities, we're a pretty safe country. And
Yeah.
and as a nation, we still have a lot of hunters and fishers and things like that. That's why we'll never have national gun control, because you can't tell a guy in Wyoming that's out hunting a moose or a big bear or whatever it is for his hunting that he can't have one. So as long as you have an electoral college where you vote by the states, well, then it's not going to happen. You're going to get pocketed gun control. But it goes back to, again, to the beliefs and the whys of the people. And by far, I think, Sam, most people, when I go to Africa, I've been to about 12 countries in Africa, they are with me with open arms. They want to talk to me. They don't want me to even try to learn their language. They want me to speak English because they want to learn English better, right? The only bias I've seen against Americans, and this is not everywhere, so I don't want to say it's in every country in Africa, is really when I travel with a Black American to Africa. I see the undertone. I don't want to call it racism, but there's an undertone, because now a lot of times an African American from the U.S. will bring a concept to Africa, and the Africans say, "You don't understand my plight. You've never lived here. You've been in America. You got it made. If I could get to America, I wouldn't have this problem. I wouldn't have to carry this water on my head for a half mile." Right? So those biases, and then what you do is, so Black Americans I've traveled with have to almost overcompensate to be a partner. And the general, I've been with some guys that they're masters at the relationship, right? They're very sympathetic and empathetic to the plight, because especially the guys I've dealt with, military or State Department. So they know that they have to try to get down on the level of that person, or up on the level, because some of these guys are smart too. They go to university too, just like we do.
Right.
And it's getting into believing their beliefs. It's kind of like if a guy from Africa comes to North Florida, he's going to talk to a guy in North Florida different than he's going to talk to a guy in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to do the same when we travel abroad as Americans. Nothing's more embarrassing than some knucklehead American that showed up somewhere and he's being stupid, and then they go, "Look at that dumb American," right? Because we say the same thing about some of these immigrants that are coming in. He's uneducated, but he may be educated in his world. He may be a master farmer or a master plumber, and we don't even know, because we don't give them the opportunity for us to build that relationship to figure out where we want to go.
Yeah, and
that was a long-winded answer for your question.
No, I appreciate it, because that's really what I wanted to like. You knew right where to end it. I say knew, like it wasn't planned. But how do we ask better questions to get to know our neighbors? Number one, like just your neighbors. They may have lived here for forever, but you may not know your neighbors. Okay, so like one, just start by getting to know your neighbors. Two, start by like when you see somebody who doesn't, in my opinion, somebody who doesn't look like you, go and ask, like get to know them, learn their experience. So what are questions that you found as you traveled around the world that helped you build a relationship quicker and an understanding quicker of whoever it is you're talking to?
Well, two quick things. Just like I prepare for an interview or a meeting in the U.S., I do the same for an international meeting. Who am I meeting? Do they have a LinkedIn? Do they have somebody I can talk to about them? What can I learn about them to figure out where we have common ground before we get in the room? We have to at least know what the lexicon of both parties entails, right? You and I talk business, we talk finance, we talk cash, we talk podcasts, we talk all kind of those kind of things. If you go internationally or even in your neighborhood, where are the common ground things that we can start the relationship with, right? And if you do that, now you can go back in, and I learned to do that because when I first went to Israel and somebody invites you to eat, you can't say no. So you need to make sure you kind of know what they eat. So I have been in a couple of situations where, oh my goodness, I'm not really sure I can even eat this. Because internationally, food is still a common ground that we can meet in the middle. Right. Break bread, whether it's hummus and pita, olives, or different types of meat, goat. There's different things that depend on where you go. Your steak or pork. I mean, there's all kind of. Of course, if vegetarians are on here, there's also vegetables too, right? So but anyway, the key is you have to find that common ground, and then you have to pick events that are events where you can build the relationship, because you're never going to go into a negotiation or ask a question until you can set the foundation for the questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it actually does. And that's kind of, again, I'm asking you, you have lots of experience, and I want to go back now to some of the other things that you had brought up in your childhood that I think are really pivotal. They're things that I teach my kids. Again, just like I'm teaching my kids the national anthem, teaching my kids the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm teaching my kids, I have a mission statement that I teach my kids. And one of the things in there is it's a bunch of I am statements. So it starts with the question like, who am I? So if I ask myself, who am I? And then I'm going to program who I am. So I ask myself, who am I? And then I have a list of everything that I am. And one of the things in there that says, that I put in there is I'm resourceful and a resource to those around me.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay. So when you were talking about in the beginning of your life, you grew up on a farm, you worked hard, and then you had to learn through common sense how to accomplish the objective, regardless of whether you had the right tools. The right tools could be questions. The right tools could be the right education. The right tools could be all different types of things. It's not going to be a physical tool. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's just what's the objective? Are you going in with a clear stated objective? Well, on the farm, and you have to figure this out, you have to learn how to be resourceful and use things that you weren't planning on using. Okay, I'm sure you have to do that in the military often when you're trying to complete operations, because you think you have the certain intel, you think you have what you need, and then you find out you didn't have what you need. So how do you adjust? The ability to be resourceful is, I think, a skill that is underdeveloped in our country, or at least there's underdeveloped confidence in people's ability to be resourceful. Even the drug addicts on the street are resourceful, right? So people, I think, as nature, humans are resourceful. Some people are aware of their resourcefulness. Others are not aware of their resourcefulness. And so then they don't actively create better resources. But what I want to find out from you is, in your process of learning this resourcefulness, what were some key questions to identify whether something would be a good resource to fulfill the objective, even if you didn't originally plan on that being a tool?
Wow. I think I want to answer that, Sam, this way. It was, I always ask, and this is another thing General Garrison instilled upon me as I was making decisions, is you have to think about the second, third, and fourth order effects of the decision you're making. Because every reaction has a counteraction, the laws of physics, right? And life's that way. Every decision you make has a counter decision that's going to be made. So you have to look at, and I find a lot of people, they want to have 100% of the facts before they can make a decision, which means the decision by then is irrelevant to be made because it's already made for you. So one of the things you'll find in my book, I say a lack of a decision is a decision, only you delegated it to someone else to make. Mm-hmm. So as you're looking at those resources, and you have to look at, I call it the 5 whys or the second or third order effect. And there's probably 6 other models that I'm not even quoting. But I think you have to think about what you have, what decision or what goal you've set. And then you can make some assumptions that some things might be achievable, or you might be able to acquire additional tools or additional education or additional money. But you've got to set out on your goal as if you're going to do it with the assets that you have now, with the resources, the mind, the money, and the power you have now. So you have to ask I call it in business, we call it the risk management steps, right? to make sure that the goal is there and we know how much risk. Because if you're going to go on a 100-mile walk across the desert, how far can I go if I run out of water? Right? Not very far. But that's where you got to ask, what do I give up? Right? So in farming, we had to, what do you give up to make sure? If you only got so much gas, you can only plow so far. What's the most important part of the field to plow? Right? If you go in the military and we've got to walk this 100-mile route, or we got to go transit this distance, what do we really need to carry? If we're in one of these units where everything we carry is on our back, well, if we know it's a 3-day piece or a 4-day piece, well, we know we need a minimum amount of food. So we got to figure out what that is. We know we need a minimum amount of water. And then how much does that weigh? So what else do we need for the mission? Or will we sacrifice a little bit of water to carry more ammo? Right? So you have to think about those steps in that goal so you have the right resources. It's kind of, I don't do video games, but I kind of see them sometimes, these different ones where they're shooting and the guy goes, oh, you better pick up that ammo, or you better pick up this, or you better, because you might need it on level 5. Well, life's the same way. On that next level, what are you picking up that you still want to carry with you so that you know you can be successful when it's time to transit that obstacle?
Yeah, and what can I get rid of that's no longer serving me and no longer important in my life? I think that question, or that concept of the second, third, fourth order effects of your decision is so crucial for 2 reasons. One, oftentimes people don't think about what the impact of their behaviors is going to be. And so they do something that they think is for themselves. And there's a term that I learned. I mean, it's a word. We all know the word. We've all heard the word, but how often do we actually know what words mean? So the word is expedient, right? A lot of times people don't even know what expediency means. We hear the word, but expediency essentially is doing what you believe is going to best serve you, right? So if you're acting in an expedient manner, you're going to do what you believe is in your best interest every time. Well, if you're only thinking of your best interest in the first effect and not in the second, third, fourth, fifth effect, then you're going to make different decisions based on which order of effect you're actually trying to affect and which order of effect you want the best outcome to be in. If you want it to be the best in the second, you might make a short-sighted decision, not realizing that the third and fourth effects are actually going to be not in your best interest. And so,
and that's America today. It's go buy the car. Don't matter that you may not be able to pay for it, or you can't afford the insurance, or go to college and change your major to a simple major instead of a harder major, and then wonder why you can't get anything in a job. Mm-hmm. And then want somebody to pay your college off, right? When I ran for office, one of the things at that time, the big thing was STEM. Everybody was quoting STEM. And there was several of us like, hey, if you want to solve this STEM problem, stop all the scholarships for anything that's not STEM. And some of the music majors got mad. I said, I'm not saying music's not important. What I'm saying is, in the state of North Carolina, because I lived in North Carolina at the time, we only have so many music major jobs. So if we're producing more music majors than we have jobs for, that means that degree is eventually watered down and worthless.
Yep. And that's with our money. That's with any supply. And this is the crux of it is we've got to be more intentional about what our second, third order effect is. And then the other element of that question, or the other benefit of the question, when we're thinking about that, is what is actually the priority? What must get done today versus what doesn't need to be done today? What's the absolute bare bones facts? If there's room for fat on the bones, wonderful, have fat on the bones. But you've got to figure out, how do you survive on the bones and make your bones work, and then add the muscles, then add the everything else into it. And I think that oftentimes people aren't doing that in their lives. They don't even know what the bones look like.
Right.
Right.
And they don't know what the plan is. They haven't even thought, in this case, I'll say the plan. How many people do you and I run into all the time that they want to be a millionaire? Mm-hmm. So I hear it and I'm saying, okay, what's your plan?
Well, even more important than what your plan is, why do you want to be a millionaire? Like not
Why? Yeah, I got you.
Not even why, from like starting from why as far as like what you think it's going to do for you. But this is what I do every day is people think, I want to be a millionaire, dude. That'd be so cool. Look, if your goal is a millionaire, here's the thing about humans. You're going to reach your goal. I'm going to be excited for you when you reach your goal. The problem is you're going to be 67 years old. You're going to have $1 million, and it's going to be the equivalent in today's money of 250 grand. So you think you want to be a millionaire when really you need to be thinking you want to be a 10 millionaire. You need to be a 100 millionaire. But you're setting your goal under because that's what everybody in the rest of the world's setting. So why did you choose $1 million? Why not 10 million? Why not 100 million? Well, a million's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot right now, but after inflation, $1 million ain't nothing. It's nothing.
Okay? And taxes.
And taxes. That tax is a whole other conversation. But just inflation is going to happen and eat that away. So it's like you think you want to be a millionaire. $1 million isn't much. And so not just do you have a plan, you could have the best plan to get to $1 million. You could have it all charted out. But if your plan was to go 100 miles in the desert and you said, I've got the best plan to go 100 miles, like I want retirement. So the goal is the other side of the desert. But then you think that the distance of 100 miles is only 10 miles. And so you plan for a 10-mile journey because that's what you think it's going to need. And then you end 10 miles in, you're like, yeah, I got 90 more miles and I didn't make it. What happens? You die, you live under the bridge, you live in a tent, like you end up just like the people in the other countries because you didn't plan well. And so understanding what the actual mission is just as crucial as do you have a plan for the mission? And yeah, we do need to know why. Like why walk across the desert? There's a lot of other ways to do it. Why are you walking? Right. So that's an important question to ask. But I think even more importantly is like, what is the real destination? Get some perspective on what the real destination is. And these are questions that when you're on the farm, as you mentioned, like, man, the military was easy because they like let you take a break. But when the objective is, I've got to get X amount of food to the other side of this country or a few states over to sell this product, that's the objective. So now that you know the objective, you could be like, man, I want to take a break. Well, if I take a break, that's not going to work for the end result. So the only thing I can do right now is drink more water. Right? I don't get to take a break. I get to drink more water because what you do alters when you have a clearly defined objective and you know what needs to be the outcome. And on the farm, you learn that. You can only, like I grew up in Idaho, okay? And had lots of friends who had cows and they milked cows. The reality is you've got to wake up and you got to milk the cow every day, whether you want to or not. Right. Like whether you want to is such a secondary thought. It's like you don't do what you want when you're on a farm. You do what needs done and you do it in whatever way you have capable of doing it. And that's a resourcefulness that isn't being fostered as much in our country as I think it could. And this is why I did this podcast is I think the reason it doesn't get fostered is because people aren't even asking the right questions.
Yeah, I agree. Because now everybody's like, do it your way or however you want to do it instead of it's got to be done.
Yeah. They're searching for a simpler way of doing it rather than how can I accomplish this? They're saying, can I do this easier? Can I do this faster? Can I do this a simpler way? Look, don't ask that question. Ask, how am I going to do it? That's a better question. What am I going to do to get it done? So we ran out of time. Like I said, there's no way. I have like a whole page of other questions to ask you. We can have another podcast though. Like you have the link. I'm definitely open to furthering this conversation. Okay. I appreciate you. Hopefully by then I'll be able to read more of your book so I can ask more questions about. And
I just approved it for Audible too. So it's up at Audible right now getting audited. Okay. Well, so it should be on Audible. We're shooting for 1 May because they need about a week. So hopefully in another week, you'll be able to get it where you can listen to it or read it.
Well, I'll listen to it and read along at the same time.
That's what I like. I do the same thing. I comprehend better. I listen to it and then I can pause it, make my notes, dog ear it, underline. Exactly.
All
right, Sam, this has been great, man. And I look forward to another session with you.
If somebody wanted to kind of step into maybe being mentored by you, coached by you, just learn more about you, where would be the best place for them to get your book? Audible's one, but is there another place that they can actually get a physical copy of your book? And then where could they reach out to you online and maybe get coaching mentorship or at least have a conversation with you?
Oh, absolutely. So the book is on Amazon. So it's and if you don't want to go how to look for it on Amazon, go to brianlkent.com. So it's brianlkent.com. And there I have links to the book. And then in the comments section, I have a drop down. If you want to have some coaching, if you want to have some discussion, you can pick the topic, send me the note, and then we'll get you in the schedule. And I could talk to you. If you want me to, for speaking opportunities or training opportunities, if you click on the website, it'll get it over, and my team will actually get look at my schedule, work with your schedule, and try to get me in front of your group or your team. But yeah, brianlkent.com, and definitely pick up the R Factor. It's in Kindle, Audible, soon to be, and softback.
Awesome. Love it. Hey, thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.